Imagine a sweltering afternoon in Paris in 1793. You walk into a narrow, damp bathroom filled with pungent medicinal fumes and lingering traces of blood. Lying in the bathtub is Marat, the giant known as the friend of the people. With a black-handled dagger worth 2 francs plunged deep into his chest. Against this blood-stained backdrop stands a young woman, eerily calm with no trace of fear in her eyes. Her name is Charlotte Corday, a legendary figure later known as the Angel of Assassination. Tonight, by the softly flickering fire, let us walk into the true story of her life, a tale worth remembering quietly. Some hail her as a saint who saved France, others condemn her as an unforgivable devil, yet she was merely a scholar who sought to end violence with violence. This is the story of the collision between ultimate tenderness and ultimate cruelty, a midnight echo hidden beneath the shadow of the Reign of Terror. Now slow your breath, let your mind drift with the wind into that turbulent era of guillotines, declarations and oaths. Come see how the woman who smiled even at the end of her life stepped steadily toward her destiny. The first crack in the story began with a newspaper in the small town of Caen in the summer of 1793. Charlotte was 24 years old then, born into a declining noble family and a descendant of the great playwright Pierre Corday. She ought to have spent the rest of her life in the tranquility of a convent, yet the sparks of revolution ignited the sky outside her window. Every day, newspapers printed long lists of innocent names condemned to the guillotine, and the source of all this bloodshed often traced back to one man, Jean-Paul Marat, who fanatically advocated purges in Paris. As Charlotte read Plutarch's Lives in her study, a monumental upheaval raged within her heart. She watched moderate Girondin deputies forced into exile, reason replaced by fanaticism, and the France she loved turning into a vast morgue. She realized that if no one stepped forward, this killing machine would devour all light. An utterly unconventional thought took root in her mind. I must kill him. Not for revenge, but to quiet the nation's tears. She sold all her possessions and bought an elegant gown, as if she were heading for a sacred banquet rather than an assassination. In truth, Charlotte's inner world was far more complex than that dagger. She was no fanatical political radical. On the contrary, she received an excellent classical education, reserved and restrained by nature. In Caen's social circles, she was remembered as an elegant woman always immersed in books, speaking in a soft, gentle voice. She cared nothing for the workings of power, clinging instead to the sense of honor and morality long forgotten by the era. This proud, even rigid idealism became the heaviest chain of her fate. When she resolved to leave Caen for Paris, she lied to her elderly father, saying she was going to England to seek a peaceful life. On the bumpy carriage ride, gazing at the fields fading into the distance outside the window, she may have felt a faint longing to live. Yet every time she closed her eyes, the wails of tens of thousands of victims echoed in her ears, leaving her with no way to turn back. This overwhelming sense of duty forged a fragile young woman into someone with a will tougher than any professional soldier. She hired no accomplices and planned no escape route, for in her own script, the moment the assassination succeeded would be the end of her life. On July 13, 1793, the air over Paris hung heavy as lead. Charlotte appeared at the shops of the Palais Royal and bought the history-altering dagger at a bargain price. She visited Marat's residence many times, only to be turned away by his jealous and suspicious housekeeper, until she wrote her famous letter. "Citizen, I am in deepest sorrow, and only you can save me." Marat, the tyrant who held tens of thousands of fates in his hands, confined himself to his bathtub to handle official documents due to a painful skin disease. He finally granted Charlotte entry, expecting her to provide a new list of names for execution. Softly and gracefully, Charlotte recited fabricated charges and false identities, watching Marat eagerly jot down every word. The moment Marat looked up and said, "They will soon be sent to the guillotine," Charlotte drew the sharp blade hidden beneath her clothes. It was a swift, precise strike, as if she had practiced it 1,000 times within the convent walls. Blood stained the water in the bathtub, the darkest hue France had ever known. And Charlotte stood there quietly, awaiting the judgment of fate. The trial following the assassination became a one-woman drama staged by Charlotte Corday herself. In court, facing the furious Jacobin judges, Charlotte maintained an unnerving calm. When asked why she had committed the deed, she held her head high and replied clearly, "I killed one man to save 100,000. Those who tried to paint her as a puppet manipulated by men were left with profound frustration. for in Charlotte, they found no selfish motives, only a pure, transparent integrity. Her beauty and aristocratic poise stood in starkest contrast to the chaos of the courtroom. The poet André Chenier watched her intently from the crowd, later composing the most beautiful elegy in her honor. Even after being sentenced to death, and having her iconic chestnut hair cut short, she joked casually with the guards beside her. This utter contempt for death unnerved even the executioners who were accustomed to endless killings. She seemed to have seen through this cruel game, reclaiming her human dignity even at the cost of her own life. The moment she walked toward the guillotine, all of Paris seemed subdued by her tranquility. It was a gloomy, drizzly evening. Dressed in a prisoner's red tunic, Charlotte rode slowly through the streets on the tumbril. Instead of shouting insults as usual, the watching crowd fell into an eerie, guilt-ridden silence. As she stepped onto the blood-stained wooden scaffold and turned to gaze at the distant sunset, a faint smile crossed her lips. The executioner Sanson later said he had never seen anyone face death with such an almost sacred grace. The moment the blade fell, the history of France stood still for a second. A fanatical soldier lifted her severed head and slapped her face in humiliation, sparking public outrage among the onlookers. This sympathy transcending class and political division was the reconciliation Charlotte had longed for in life. With her own life, she cracked open a gap of conscience on the wall of this mad era. Though the reign of terror did not end immediately after Marat's death, the fanatical delusion began to crumble because of one woman's smile. The life of Charlotte Corday has come to an end, a tale of how supreme radiance shattered against an iron wall. She was the loneliest rebel of her time, honoring the freedom in her heart in the form of classical tragedy. Let us answer the core question from the prologue. Was her life a failure? No. With her life, she proved that even in the deepest darkness, individual will can shine with blazing light. Today, the guillotine has long turned to dust, and that blood-stained bathroom has become a relic in a museum. Yet Charlotte's unyielding, elegant spirit still lingers in the corridors of history, carried on the midnight breeze. Our story for the night ends here. May the fortitude of this angel of assassination bring you peaceful comfort by your pillow. Turn off the lights, and let your soul settle gently in that distant, turbulent era. May your dreams be free of violence, filled only with the clear dawn reflected in Charlotte's eyes. Good night.